Hello and welcome to Crochet Advent. I do have some Christmas decor up, don't be fooled, I'm just kind of standing in front of it right now. If you are unaware, Crochet Advent is where I'm going to be posting one crochet tutorial every single day starting today, December 1st, all the way up until Christmas. These tutorials are supposed to be things that you can make for friends or loved ones. The closer we get to Christmas, the faster and the easier the tutorials are going to be, so you can make a last minute gift for them. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the rest of these tutorials, because this is just day one. We got a bunch more on the way. I'm putting a lot of work into this as well, and the only reason I can do this is because of your support. So please subscribe, like the video. Thank you so much in advance. Here is our first tutorial for our very first day of Crochet Advent. Today we are going to be crocheting this beautiful striped pillowcase. It has this sort of spiked or modified caramel stitch. It is so comfortable. I made it out of cotton yarn and it has these little bows on the side. So this exact pillowcase that we're making today is the standard pillowcase size, which I believe is 20 inches by 26 inches, but you can always adjust the measurements of this pillowcase if you need to fit a different pillow. So this is what we're going to make today, and let's go ahead and jump right into the tutorial for this crochet caramel stitch striped little bow opening pillowcase. The pillowcase design that I'm making today, or the dimensions for this pillowcase, is going to be standard size. And if you wanted to make a pillowcase for a queen or a king pillow instead, then I would look up on Google the dimensions for those pillows and just adjust the pillowcase slightly to fit that. But we're going to be making the standard normal size pillowcase today. So for this tutorial, I'm using weight 4 cotton yarn. I'm using the colors Stonewash and Ivory, and I love this cotton from Hobby Lobby. And I will also be using a 5mm crochet hook. So when you're picking out these colors, if you want to look here on this panel of the stitch, we're going to have sort of the base color, which is underneath, and then the accent color, which sort of spikes down. So you want to decide now which color you want to be sort of the base and which color you want to be what is called the sort of a caramel stitch, I believe is the type of stitch we're doing today. And so you have to pick which color you want for which part of the design. So I'm going to be doing the white cotton for the base and then the blue cotton for the spiky or caramel stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and start with my white cotton yarn, and now I'm going to start by casting on with a slip knot, and then I'm going to begin by chaining 70. So again, you can adjust the chain if you need to make a different size pillowcase, but for the standard pillowcase here, I'm going to start by chaining 70 with my white base color cotton. And for reference, if you are adjusting the length of the chain at all, you want to make sure that you're chaining an even number. So in this case, I chained 70, and now that last chain there acts as our turning chain. So technically we have an odd number of chains, but then we just do one more as a turning chain, which therefore makes it an even number. So I'm going to go ahead and go past that last chain I just made, because that's our turning chain, and go right into the next chain here, and then place a single crochet. And now all I'm going to do is just an entire row here of single crochet. So into every single one of these chain stitches, I'm going to be inserting my hook and placing a single crochet stitch. So I should have a total of 69 single crochet stitches once I reach the end of the row. And now at the end of this row, once I've completed all 69 of those single crochet stitches, I'm going to chain 1 to act as our turning chain and then turn my work. And now I'm just going to repeat that exact same process. So I'm going to insert my hook right into that first stitch there and place a single crochet. And I'm just going to single crochet in every single stitch all the way down this entire row until I've completed another row of single crochet. So again, it should be 69 stitches in total of single crochet all the way down to the end of the row. And at the end of the row, I'm going to go ahead and chain 1 and turn my work, and then we're going to repeat this one more time. So for another row here, I'm just going to place single crochet stitches into every single stitch all the way down this entire row until I've completed my third row of single crochet. And now you should have 3 rows here with that single crochet of the base color. So we're going to go ahead and bring in our second color. So if you want to, you can cut your yarn and cast on, but instead, because I cannot stand weaving in loose ends, to save myself from having to weave in a loose end every single time I switch colors, what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to pull my hook to make this loop nice and long. And if you want to make sure it doesn't come undone, you can tie a very loose knot, or I just kind of let it sit like this and I just make sure this doesn't pull undone, because if this gets tugged too short, then obviously these stitches will fall apart. So just want to keep that loop nice and long as I'm crocheting. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm not going to cut my yarn or cast off. Instead, I'm just going to turn my work like so, and then I'm going to insert my hook right into that first stitch like so. And now I'm going to go ahead and get my blue or second color of cotton yarn. And now I'm going to go ahead and cast on. So I'm going to pick up the yarn with my hook here, pull it right through that stitch that I had inserted my hook into previously, and then sort of pinching it all together, I'm going to pick up some more yarn and pull it right through that loop as well. I'm going to give the tail a little tug to help tighten it, and now I am officially casted on here. So I'm going to chain 1 like so, and then insert my hook into the exact same stitch I just casted onto. So that first stitch of the row, I'm inserting my hook and placing a single crochet stitch like so. So now we're working with our blue yarn, and now we're going to complete our first sort of unique stitch. So going into this next stitch here, I'm going to start by yarning over and inserting my hook right into the next stitch like so, and then I'm going to pick up some yarn and pull it through that stitch. So I should have 3 loops on my hook. I'm then going to yarn over again, and now instead of going into the next stitch, I'm actually going to look down. So instead of looking across horizontally, I'm looking vertically. So you'll see we have the very first stitch there, and if we go down, here's the stitch of the previous row, and then we have a 3rd stitch from the first row that we did. So we're working down our project instead of across. So I just yarned over, and now I'm going to go past that top stitch and insert my hook right into the 2nd stitch of that 2nd row, and then pick up some yarn and pull it up like so. So now you should have 5 loops on your hook, and now one last time I'm going to yarn over, and this time I'm going all the way down to the very 3rd stitch here. So down to the 3rd or 1st row, whichever way you're looking at it, I'm going to insert my hook into that stitch, pick up some yarn, and pull it through like so. So now you should have 7 loops on your hook. I believe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yep, 7 loops on your hook. I'm then going to pick up some yarn, and I tip my hook down to make it easier to pull this strand through. I also kind of pull my hook up, which helps to widen these loops to make it easier. So pulling my hook up, tipping my hook down, I just pull it right through all of those loops like so. And now right into the next stitch, which that next stitch sometimes can get a little bit hidden by all of this yarn, so you might have to kind of pull it back to find that next stitch, but you want to make sure you're not missing a single stitch. So right into that next stitch, I'm going to insert my hook and just place a single crochet. So it should look like this. We have a simple single crochet, and then this sort of spike stitch that goes all the way down, and then another single crochet. So now we're going to go ahead and do another one of these caramel or spike stitches, and we do these in every other stitch. So again, I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook right into the next stitch, pick up some yarn and pull it through, and then yarn over, and now we're going down, so I'm going into the 2nd stitch, so the one right below the stitch before, and then pick up some yarn and pull it through, and then yarn over, and now I'm going into the very 3rd stitch here, going all the way down to that 3rd stitch, pick up some yarn and pull it through, and pick up some yarn, tipping my hook down and kind of pulling it up to make it easier. I'm going to just pull that yarn through all of those loops like so, and then I'm going to single crochet right into the next stitch like so, and then again yarn over, insert my hook into that 1st stitch, pick up some yarn and pull it through, and then yarn over, insert my hook into the stitch right below it, pick up some yarn and pull that through, yarn over, insert my hook into that 3rd stitch or the 1st row, whichever way you're looking at it, pick up some yarn and pull it through, pick up some yarn, tip my hook down and pull it through all of the loops on my hook like so. Single crochet right into that next stitch, which again sometimes can get hidden, so make sure you are finding that immediate next stitch, and then yarn over into the 1st stitch, pick up some yarn, yarn over, going down to the 2nd row or 2nd stitch and picking up some yarn, yarning over, and then going down to the 3rd or 1st row, the 3rd stitch here, and picking up some yarn like so, pick up some yarn and pull it through all 7 loops, and then single crochet like so. So that's how you complete this stitch, and you're going to be doing that in every other stitch. You're going to go single crochet and then this stitch, single crochet and then that stitch, and you're just going to go back and forth all the way down this entire row here. So I'm going to repeat this same process, placing these, I want to say they're called caramel stitches, but placing these stitches all the way down the entire row, going back and forth until you reach the end of the row. And your very last stitch of the row should be a single crochet. So if we did all of the numbers correctly when making the chain and those rows, you should start with a single crochet and then end with a single crochet. So now here's that row completed with those stitches all the way across. It looks so pretty. And now we're going to go ahead and just chain 1. and then turn our work, like so. And now I'm going to be doing one row of single crochet. So I'm just placing a single crochet into every one of these stitches, and on these sort of spike or caramel stitches here, you'll see at the very top there still is that very distinct stitch that makes up a stitch hole there. We can just insert our hook and complete that single crochet. So just make sure that you're inserting your hook into all of the stitches going across, doing one full row of single crochet, which again should be 69 stitches going all the way across. And now at the end of this row, we're going to go ahead and switch colors again. So again, if you want to, you could just cut the yarn, but to save all those loose ends, instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this yarn so I have a really nice big loop that's not going to come undone. And then I'm going to go ahead and go down a little bit where we have that loop from the white yarn. So I'm going to find the loop here and kind of just stick my hook in that loop. And I'm going to pull the yarn until that loop closes and tightens around my hook, like so. And now what we need to do is we need to get this yarn up to the top here, because we want to start working on top of the blue, but our yarn and our hook is currently below the blue. We just need to carry it up and over. So because this here was 2 rows of blue, each chain makes up 1 row, or the height of 1 row. So I'm going to go ahead and chain 1 and 2. And then because you always start a row with a turning chain, we need to chain 1 extra, so 3. So basically you're going to chain 3 and then turn your work. And again, this is only if you're not cutting your yarn to switch colors. So now after turning my work, I'm going to kind of move this loop of blue yarn out of the way. I'm just leaving it right there. And then I'm going to insert my hook into that very first stitch and place a single crochet. So now you see that our yarn and our hook is on the top of the row, which is exactly where we need it to be, and we don't have any loose ends. We do have this sort of bar of white going across the side here, but because we are going to be sewing the pillowcase together, this little bar of white is going to be on the inside, in the inside seam, and we won't see it. So it's totally okay to have it there. It'll be hidden, we won't see it, and therefore we won't have to weave in a bunch of loose ends. So now that we're here, ready to go, I'm going to go ahead and complete 3 rows of single crochet. So we're just doing plain single crochet into every single stitch all the way down to the end. And just like we did before, I'm going to complete 3 entire rows of single crochet. So I'll see you once I've done all 3 of these rows. And now after completing all 3 rows here, we want to go ahead and switch colors again. So again, I'm going to pull my yarn to create that really big loop that's not going to come undone, like so. And now I need to go find where I left the blue yarn. So back here where I left the blue yarn, you'll see that big loop where I just left it sitting. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before, where I kind of insert my hook into that big loop, and then I'm going to pull the yarn, pull the tail, in order to tighten that loop up around the hook, like so. So that I'm now ready to begin crocheting. But again, the blue yarn is all the way down here, and I need it to be up here on the top of those 3 rows of white. So what we're going to do is we're going to chain 1 for each row that was completed. So we start by chaining 3. So 1, 2, and 3. And then we need to chain 1 more to act as a turning chain. So we're basically chaining 4 to reach the very top here. So I'm going to turn my work and then insert my hook into that very first stitch and place a single crochet. So just like we did with the white, we create sort of this bridge or ladder that brings our yarn from this spot here up back to the top where we need to start our next stripe. And again, these sort of bits of yarn on the side will be hidden once we actually sew or put the pillowcase together. So we start with that 1 single crochet stitch, and now we need to yarn over, insert our hook into the next stitch, pick up some yarn and pull it through. And then yarn over, and now we're going down again. So I'm inserting my hook below into the 2nd row there, pick up some yarn and pull it through, and then yarn over and insert my hook all the way down into that 3rd row, like so, pick up some yarn and pull it through. And then picking up some yarn, I'm going to pull it through all of those loops, and then single crochet right into the next stitch, like so. And it should line up with the row before, so all of these sort of spike stitches should be in the exact same spot as they were in the previous row, so it should just line up every single time. And then again, yarn over, insert your hook into the next stitch, pick up some yarn and pull it through, yarn over, and then I'm going to go down into the 2nd row, inserting my hook right into the stitch in the 2nd row, and picking up some yarn and pulling it through, yarn over, going all the way down to the 3rd row there, picking up some yarn and pulling that through. And then pick up some yarn, pull it through all the loops, and then make sure I'm not missing the actual stitch here for the next single crochet, like so. So again, yarn over into the first stitch, yarn over into the second stitch, yarn over into the third stitch, pick up some yarn, pull it through, like so. And then single crochet. So just like we did before, we're repeating that exact same process where I'm doing single crochet, unique stitch, single crochet, unique stitch, and going back and forth, all the way down to the end of the row, completing these sort of spike or caramel stitches here by going yarn over, first stitch, yarn over, second stitch or row, yarn over, third stitch or row, and pull it through, like so. So I'm going to repeat this all the way down until I reach the end of the row. And just like before, it's important that at the end of this row is a single crochet. So it should line up that we started the row and ended the row with just a plain single crochet. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to chain one and turn my work. And then we're going to do just one row here of plain single crochet stitches with the blue yarn still. So again, just working into all of these stitches, I'm just placing a single crochet into every single stitch, going all the way down, completing one row here of just plain single crochet. And now at the end of the row, I need to switch colors again. So again, instead of cutting my yarn, I'm going to pull this loop really big so it's not going to come undone. And then I'm going to go look for the white yarn, which is over on the other side here. And then I'm going to insert my hook into that loop and pull it tight so it snugly fits around my hook. And now again, we need to bring this color up to the top. So I'm going to chain one for each row that we did before. So here's 1 and 2 for those 2 rows of blue, and then one more for a turning chain. So I chained 3 in total. I then turned my work, and I'm going to single crochet right into that first stitch there. So I'm ready to go and complete 3 rows of single crochet with this white yarn. So that's all there is to it in terms of completing this stitch. You're just going to repeat the same process of doing 3 rows of single crochet and then 2 rows, the first one being with these stitches in every other stitch, and the second one being just all single crochet. And you're just going to keep going until you have 26 of these stripes completed. So again, if you're wanting to do a queen size or king size pillowcase, you might need to do more, but each one of these stripes are about 1 inch wide alone, so altogether we were going to need 26 of these stripes. So I'm going to go ahead and complete 26 of these, so 3 rows of white, 2 rows of blue, 26 times, so I'll have one big panel, and I'll be back once I've completed that. Okay, so I've now completed 26 stripes for this entire panel, so the entire thing is 26 inches long, which is a total of 26 of these white and blue stripes. And I ended here on that final row of single crochet at the very top of this last stripe. And now we're going to go ahead and just do one more row of single crochet. So I already did that one row of the caramel or spike stitch, and then I did that one row of single crochet on top. But now because this is the end of the entire panel, we want to just end with one more row of single crochet. So I'm going to chain one and then turn my work, and then just single crochet all the way down on top of this previous row of single crochet. So we're just doing one extra row here with the blue or the accent color of one row of single crochet. And then I'm just going to cut my blue yarn, and I leave a couple inches behind of the yarn so I have a little tail to weave in later, and I just cut that yarn. And then I'm going to take my hook and pull that yarn till it pops right through that chain one and give it a little tug to lock it in place. I also need to cast off of my other color, which is the white yarn. So I need to find where I originally kind of left that loop. So just like I did before, I left this very long loop here. I'm going to go ahead and just pull that yarn down over my hook, like so. And then we're going to cast off with this color as well. So I'm going to chain one, and then just like I did before, I'm going to cut my yarn, leaving a little bit of a tail so I can weave it in later. And then I'm going to pull my hook until that yarn pops right through, like so. So there is the panel completed with a total of 26 rows here, and it's just such a pretty stitch pattern with just a little extra blue at the very top just to kind of finish off the look. And now what you want to do is go ahead and make an exact replica of this. So you're going to make another one of these panels with the same number of chains at the beginning and the same number of rows going all the way up. And then once you have 2 panels, we can go ahead and assemble the pillowcase. So here I have 2 exact replicas of panels. I can't get the entire panel into the camera shot right now, but there's just these 2 big panels here. that are 26 inches tall here, 26 stripes, and then 20 inches wide across. So now we're going to go ahead and make this into a pillowcase. So I'm going to put these right sides together, and all that means is I'm going to pick which side of these panels I prefer, and whichever side I think looks better is the side I'm going to put on the inside, and whichever side I think looks messier is the side I'm putting on the outside. So I'm putting them right sides together, and then I'm making sure that the part here where we did an extra row is at the top for both panels. So to make sure they're lined up correctly, we should have this extra bit of blue, or just the spot where that extra color you did an additional row at the very top here. So now we're going to go ahead and attach these. So I'm just lining them up like so, laying them flat. And now I'm going to get my hook, and I'm going to get my base color yarn, or my white yarn here. So I'm grabbing my white cotton yarn, and I'm going to go over across the top here to the left corner. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert my hook into that very top left stitch on this first panel here, like so. And then going down to the second panel, which should be just right under that top panel, I'm going to insert my hook right into that same exact top left stitch, like so. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab my white yarn, and I want to cast on with this yarn. So the way I do that is I'm going to pick up the yarn that I'm currently just holding, and I'm going to pull it right through both of those stitches. So I'm pulling it through both of the stitches, and then I'm going to chain one, chain one, there we go, to lock it in place, like so. So we now have that yarn casted on, and I'm now going to kind of turn the panels here, so I'm working all the way down the left side. So now I'm working all the way down the left side. I just rotated the panels, so this top left corner is now up, and I'm going just down the side here. So we're going to be slip stitching all the way down the entire side of this pillowcase. So the way this works is I'm going to insert my hook into the second stitch down here. So I'm going right into that second stitch on that first top panel. And then if I look at the second panel, which is the panel right below, I'm going to find the second stitch on that panel as well. So you want to insert your hook into a stitch for both panels, so you're kind of sewing the panels together. So I'm inserting my hook right into the second stitch down on both sides. Again, we're working down this way. We're not working across the top. I'm working down the left side here. So I'm going to go ahead and slip stitch now. So I'm getting my yarn. I'm going to pick up the yarn, and I'm going to just pull it through both of those stitches like so. So I now have 2 loops on my hook, and I'm going to pull it through that last loop. So I should just have 1 loop on my hook, and that's what's called a slip stitch. And now I'm going to go down into the third stitch here, going right into that third stitch on the first or top panel. I'm then going to kind of move that top panel to the side, and then find the third stitch on the second or bottom panel. It's very important that you're picking up the exact same stitch for both panels. So I need to make sure I'm picking up the third stitch on both panels, and I'm not picking up the third stitch for the front and the fourth stitch for the back. It's very important that it's all lined up and you're picking up the correct stitch on both sides. So I'm going to go into that third stitch on both the front and the back panel, pick up some yarn, pull it through both the stitches, and then pull it through the loop on my hook, like so. And then we're going to go into the fourth stitch. With the fourth stitch here should be the very first stitch of our base color, so this white color here. That's how you know you're doing it correctly, is the fourth stitch should be that very first stitch of that color. And now if you didn't cast off at the end of every row and you instead did what I recommended, which was to chain and kind of carry the yarn across, you'll see here that we have that sort of loose chain where I carried the blue yarn from this section up over the white. And so this is the time where we're going to make sure that this chain isn't seen anymore. So we want to leave it on the inside of the pillowcase, which currently we have the wrong side face up, which means that we're going to make sure that this stays on the wrong side. So I'm going to kind of push that chain down, and I'm going to go right into that stitch there of the white. So you'll see that this little chain section is on the other side of my hook. If I wanted to keep this chain section, I would go in from this way, and I would kind of scoop it up with the stitch. But because I'm trying to hide this and I want to keep it on the inside of the pillowcase, I'm instead going on the other side and then picking up the stitch so that this is staying on this side of the panel. I hope that makes sense. So then again, when I go over to the other side here, I'm going to pick up that first stitch of white, or the fourth stitch of the panel, and then I'm going to slip stitch. So I pull through those 2 stitches on my hook, and then also pull through the 1 stitch or loop that was also on my hook, like so. And now we're going to go into our 5th stitch, or what is the second stitch of white. So I'm going right into that second stitch there. And then I'm doing the exact same thing on the other panel. Again, picking up the exact same stitch on both sides and making sure this little chain section here is on the inside of the hook, so it's going to stay on this side of the project and it won't get carried through to the right side of the project. We just want to make sure it's hidden on the inside, which currently we have inside face up, so we want to make sure it's just kind of tucked away here. And then I'm going to slip stitch like so, and then just repeat this. So going right into the next stitch on both sides here, and then going to slip stitch, and that should be all of the white covered. And now we're going right into the blue, so there should be 2 slip stitches here for the blue, like so, and 2. And then again, we're doing the white. And now here we have that little chain section, and I'm going to make sure that that chain section is on the other side of my hook. Even if I have to force it to the other side and I have to kind of pull it over, I'm still going to make sure it's on the other side of my hook, and I'm bringing it to the front of this panel so that way when we turn it inside out, it's on the inside only. And I'm going to pick up that first stitch of white on both sides and slip stitch like so. And that's all there is to it. So as you're slip stitching, one important thing to note is that you don't want to be holding your yarn too tightly or making the slip stitches too tight, because if you're making them too tight, the yarn as you slip stitch or the material is going to bunch up under the tension, and you want to just keep them on the looser side so as you're stitching, the panels stay nice and flat. So just make sure you're not holding your yarn too tight, and then again, if you have these little chain sections, make sure you're kind of pushing those chain sections towards the top of each panel. That way they're going to be hidden once we turn it right side out. So you'll see here, like these blue chain sections here, I slip stitch down and the chain section is pushed away from the slip stitches and is sitting right on top of the panel. So once we turn it inside out or right side out, you won't see it anymore and it's going to be hidden right inside. And that's how we get away with switching colors a lot without having to weave in loose ends, and then also not having to see these little spots where we carried over the yarn. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to continue slip stitching, and I'm going to go all the way down this entire panel. So I'm going all the way down the entire left side here with slip stitches. And then I'm going to go all the way across the entire bottom, and then go all the way across up this side as well. So you're going to repeat the same process, slip stitching along all of the edges except for the very top here where we have that extra row of blue. This is the opening of our pillowcase. Otherwise, you're going to slip stitch again all the way down the entire left side, all the way across the bottom, all the way along the top here. So I'm going to go ahead and complete that, just slip stitching all the way along with that white yarn and making sure that the little chain sections are being placed in the correct spot. And then I'm going to work all the way around, and I'll be back once I've completed my slip stitching around the entire outside of the pillowcase. So I've now slip stitched all the way around, and you should be able to tell here that you can see it's a little bit messy because we have those chain sections pushed to the outside. So when I turn it this way, you'll see that you can't see those chain sections. So this is exactly what we want it to look like. And instead of cutting my yarn or casting off, I'm just going to do the same thing we've been doing before, where I'm going to pull a nice long loop and then just let that yarn fall for now. So I've already put a pillow into this pillowcase just to make sure I like the way it fits. So I just found a standard, like nice squishy pillow and put it in. Now you can leave it at this and just have a completed pillow, turn it right side out, weave in all the loose ends. But to make it super cute, we want to go ahead and add some little bow ties right to the opening of the pillow. So let's go ahead and mark where we want these ties to take place. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab some stitch markers quickly. I typically use bobby pins for this, but all I'm going to do is kind of go a little bit down the pillow here and mark a stitch where I want to have the first tie, and then do the same thing on the other side like so. And I'm then going to count and make sure it's exactly the same. So what I do is I count in from the seam to the first stitch marker here. So let's see, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this stitch marker is on the 22nd stitch. So I'm going to slide my pillowcase over to the other side where I have this stitch marker. I'm going to count from this corner down, and it should be the same number of stitches. 1, 2, 17. This is on the 17th stitch, so I'm going to go 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and move my stitch marker over to that 22nd stitch, like so. I'm going to check and see if I like that placement, and I think I want to section them out a little bit further, so I'm actually going to move this over to, let's see, 21, 20, maybe the 18th stitch, like so. Let's try down this side, so 22, 21, 20, 19, 18. So you just kind of want to fiddle around with the stitch markers until you like the way they are placed, and just make sure they're evenly placed, so they should have the same number of stitches from the edge to the stitch marker on either side. So I like this placement. If I can tip the pillow here, I'll kind of show you. It's really hard for me to get this whole pillow on screen, and I apologize for that, but there's just not enough room for this big project. So if I tip it here, this is sort of the opening of the pillowcase, and so I have the bows on sort of the top and closer to the bottom of the pillowcase, but still more center focused. So I just have them evenly spaced on the pillowcase, and you can add as many of these ties as you want to. You could add 3 or 4, but for this design, I'm going to be adding 2. And now with the pillow removed, you can see what that distance looks like now too. So I ended up going 19 stitches down from the border in for each stitch marker. And again, you can place them wherever you want to. This is just where we're going to place the ties. So now I'm going to kind of line it up here, and I'm going to go to the back panel, and I'm going to count 19 or as many stitches in as I did on this side, so that way they're all lined up on either side. So going to the back panel here, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. And on that 19th stitch, I'm going to go ahead and mark it. This way it's perfectly lined up with the front panel here. And I'm going to do that on the other side too. And then again, I'm going to mark it right on that 19th stitch. So now the exact same stitches are marked on either side. So when we make the ties, they're going to be perfectly lined up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to leave all these stitch markers here except for just one. I'm going to start over here on the front right stitch marker. I'm going to go ahead and remove that stitch marker and replace it with my crochet hook. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually put my hook on one stitch to the right. And I'm inserting my hook into one stitch before it right to the right. So this was our marked stitch, and this is the stitch that we are working into. I'm then going to grab my blue yarn, or the color yarn that I'm currently working off of, so the accent color here. I'm going to cast on. So I'm going to pick up that yarn, pull it right through, and chain 1 to lock it in place like so. And now we're going to chain 35. You can chain more or less if you want the ties to be longer or shorter, but I have found that this number is just a really nice even bow tie number. So I'm going to go ahead and start by chaining 35. Here's my chain of 35 completed, so it should just be a chain that's coming right off the top of our pillowcase here. So now I'm going to go ahead, and I'm not going to do an extra chain for a turning chain. That 35th chain just acts as our turning chain. So I'm going to go straight into the second chain here, insert my hook, and place a single crochet. So now all I'm doing is single crocheting all the way down this entire chain here. So I'm starting all the way from the top and then single crocheting all the way down until I reach the bottom of the chain, which should be the top of the pillowcase. So I'm just going to do one row of single crochet here. And I should have a total of 34 single crochet stitches once I reach the bottom of this chain. And then once I've single crocheted all the way down, so here you can see there's one row of single crochet going all the way down, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at where we started off with that chain. So you can see in this stitch we started making that chain. I'm going to insert my hook right into the stitch right after it. This should be the stitch that we had marked previously. I'm going to insert my hook right into that stitch, and then I'm going to slip stitch. So I'm picking up the yarn, pulling it through that stitch, and then also through the loop on my hook, which completes a slip stitch, and it brings that crochet right down flush to the project like so. So now we just have a nice little string coming right off of the project. I'm then going to chain 1 like so, and then grab my scissors. And then leaving a little bit of a tail behind, I'm going to cut my yarn like so, and then pull the yarn until it pops right through that chain and give it a little tug to lock it in place. So here's our very first of the ties completed, and now I'm going to go over to the other side, or the back panel here where we have our other stitch marker, and I'm going to do that same thing. So I'm going to insert my hook into the stitch that is directly to the right of the stitch that's marked, so this one right here, and I'm going to go ahead and remove that stitch marker, and then I'm going to pick up my blue yarn and then pull it right through, and I'm going to go ahead and chain 35, or the exact same number that I chained for the other side. And so here's that chain of 35, and I'm going to go right into the next chain stitch here, so the 34th chain stitch, and place a single crochet. And just like we did before, I'm now going to single crochet into every single one of these chain stitches all the way back down to the opening of the pillowcase. So I'm just doing one row here of single crochet. And here at the end of the row, once I've single crocheted down that entire chain there, I'm going to go right into the next stitch here on the body of the project, or the top of the pillowcase. I'm going right into the next stitch here, which is the one that we had marked, and I'm going to slip stitch. So I'm going to pick up the yarn, pull it through that stitch, and then pull it through the loop on my hook like so, therefore completing that tie as well. I'm then going to go ahead and cast off, so I'm going to chain 1 and then cut my yarn, leaving a little bit of a tail behind so I can weave it in later. And then give that yarn a tug and tug it again to tighten it, like so. So there's the first 2 ties completed, and now you want to do the exact same thing on this side. So on the right side here, when we're doing these ties, you want to start 1 stitch to the right of the marked stitch. But on the left side of the pillowcase, you want to start on the marked stitch, so then you'll end 1 stitch to the left. So I'm going to do the same thing on these 2 stitch markers, but instead of inserting my hook 1 stitch over or 1 stitch over, I'm going to insert my hook directly on the stitch marker and then slip stitch 1 stitch over to the left. And I'm going to do the exact same thing to then get these 2 ties on this side as well. After adding all 4 ties here to the top of the pillowcase, I'm going to add one final step, which is a little border of white around everything. This is completely optional, but I think it just looks so much prettier this way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to where we completed those slip stitches and where we didn't cast off, but instead I just pulled the yarn really long. And the reason why I didn't cast off is now we can do this border without creating even more loose ends. You'll notice I really do not like weaving in loose ends, and so most of my tutorials I try to show you how to do this with the least amount of loose ends possible. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up this loop of yarn like so, and now I'm going to chain 1. Okay, and now I'm just going to single crochet. So I'm going to insert my hook right into the next stitch and place a single crochet and just repeat this. So into every single one of these stitches along the top of the pillowcase, I'm just placing a single crochet stitch. And I'm just going to keep on going, placing these single crochet stitches into all of these stitches here up until I reach that very first tie, which should be only about 19 stitches in. So right here, I've bumped into the very first tie or string that we had made. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert one more single crochet into the exact same stitch that that tie comes out of, like so. And then I'm going to insert my hook into the very first stitch here of the string or the tie that we made and place a single crochet, like so. And now I'm just going to kind of rotate my work so that way now I'm working along the side of the tie here. And now into every single one of these stitches, so all 34 of these stitches, I'm placing single crochets going all the way up like so. And now at the very top here, I'm going to make sure I insert my hook into that top stitch of the row. And then I'm going to insert one more stitch into that exact same stitch at the top. This just helps me to go over the edge or the top of this strap without it bunching up. So I'm placing 2 stitches into that very top stitch there at the very top of the tie, and then I'm going to go right into this chain stitch. So now I'm going to single crochet all the way down the chain side here. So each one of these stitches now all the way down, so 34 stitches in total, I'm just single crocheting all the way back down this sort of tie. And this is just giving it a really pretty little white border around the entire tie. And then once I worked my way all the way back down like so, I'm just going to place one more single crochet stitch into the exact same stitch that I'd slip stitched into previously. So this exact same stitch here, I'm going to place a single crochet like so. So this is what it should look like. It's just a really pretty little white border going all the way around, and it helps to tie those colors together more. So now I'm just going to repeat this same process. So I'm going to just start single crocheting again around the opening of the pillowcase until I reach the next tie or string, and then do that exact same thing. And I'm going to keep on going until I've gone all the way around the entire opening of the pillowcase, and I get right back to where I started there, and I have gone up and over all 4 of these strings. I've now single crocheted around that entire opening. These little ties kind of twist up when you're not actually having them tied as a bow, but you can see here that I single crocheted along each of the ties as well, and I've gone all the way around, and now I'm right here where I started. So I'm right back to the seam here, right where I started. So now I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to find that very first single crochet stitch that I made. Okay, so right here is that very first single crochet stitch that I originally made when I started doing this little border. I inserted my hook right into that stitch, and now I'm going to slip stitch. So I'm picking up some yarn, pulling it through that stitch and through the loop on my hook. I'm then going to chain 1 and then cut my yarn, leaving a little bit of a tail behind so I can weave it in later. Like so. And I pull my hook to pop that yarn right through and give it a little tug to lock it in place. So we are now done crocheting the pillowcase. Now all that's left to do is weave in all these loose ends, and then you're just going to turn the pillowcase right side out. And here is the finished pillowcase. I really hope this tutorial was easy for you to follow and that you liked the way the pillowcase turned out. If you wanted to send me any pictures of the finished product, I would love to see it. Feel free to tag me over on Instagram, or you can just send me a picture to my Instagram DMs. I'll do my very best to respond. I always really like seeing the way your guys' projects turn out. And I hope you're just as excited for Crochet Advent as I am. I'll see you tomorrow with another crochet video. Again, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. I'm going to really need the support this Christmas season. And here is our finished pillowcase. I hope you like how it turned out. I'll see you again tomorrow. Goodbye.